Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar, How Talent Acquisition Can Make the Highest Impact. We're going to go ahead and get started. Before we get into some really great content today, I would like to go over a little bit of housekeeping. You can connect to audio using either your computer's microphone and speakers by selecting computer audio, or opt in to dial in using your phone by selecting phone call. All lines will be muted to avoid background noise, but if you do have questions during the course of the webinar, be sure to type them using the questions tab on the panel. Additionally, we will be taking questions at the end, time permitting, so be sure to save those until the end. We also will be distributing a recording and slides from today's webinar, so look out for an email from Medalle in the next coming days for that. Without further ado, I'd love to introduce our speakers today. We have Robin Erickson, Vice President of Talent Acquisition, Engagement, and Retention Research at Bersin by Deloitte, and Glenn Medalle, VP of Talent Acquisition at AppDynamics. We'll also be live tweeting the webinar from that Intello Twitter handle. You can also join the conversation by tweeting at Robin Erickson, at Bersin, and at AppDynamics, and please use the hashtag HireLikeABoss. So with that, I'll turn it over to Robin to get us into the agenda and the rest of the great content we have today.
Terrific. Thanks so much, Sydney, and welcome to all of our participants. Excited about today's webinar and sharing with you the results of Bersin research and a real-life case study from AppDynamics with Glenn. Glenn and I are going to be fairly conversational throughout this broadcast, so hopefully that will make it a little bit more fun for you all. But just want to let you know we're going to start with the welcome and introduction. We're going to then talk about the survey that we did here at Bersin, our key findings. We're going to talk a little bit about the maturity model that we created. We do that with all of our Bersin high impact studies. And then Glenn's going to go through the AppDynamics case study, and we will definitely leave time at the end for question and answer. So we look forward to your participation, especially we're going to start with our first polling question. If Sydney wouldn't mind pulling that up. Our first polling question is, how important is talent acquisition in your organization? And you can see that the responses for that are, it's a critical issue for the CEO. It's important only to human resources and talent management. It's always back burner. And the last one is, no one cares about TA except for you, basically. So you are here to learn what you can because nobody cares. But Glenn, tell us about how important talent acquisition is at AppDynamics.
Yeah, sure. First of all, thank you for having me today, Sydney and Robin. Appreciate the invite. Talent acquisition at AppDynamics is one of the key strategic initiatives. At AppDynamics, we go by the 3 R's, which is recruit, retain, and revenue, in that order. So based on that, you can tell that it is one of our top initiatives, something that's always top of mind for AppDynamics.
Okay, well, let's see what the results are and see how our audience came back. Wow, 78%. Critical issue for the CEO. That's very impressive. Only 20% were important only to HR and talent management, and everybody cares about TA. Well, I'm actually excited to see that. For those of you who responded always back burner, I hope we can give you some data today to help increase the business case when you talk about talent acquisition, and definitely have an example of, I'm actually really impressed, Glenn, with recruit, retain, and revenue in that order. I might want to talk to you about that offline.
Oh, yes, definitely.
Terrific. All right, so we'll go to the next slide, which is the reason why we asked this polling question is because in 2017, Deloitte's Global Human Capital Trends Survey asked more than 10,000 HR and business leaders across 140 questions about which 11 HR issues were most important to them. And you can see that talent acquisition and employee experience were numbers 3 and 4. And I know, 2017 is slightly dated, but the survey size is so huge. over 10,000 HR and business leaders across 140 countries. And if you look at some of the things that come below it, obviously, how often do you hear talent acquisition being talked about in the market? I think we hear more about diversity and inclusion or people analytics or the buzz around AI. So I love this chart because it basically just says, look, at the end of the day, CEOs, HR leaders, business leaders, they're concerned about talent acquisition and that employee experience, which begins with the candidate experience. So I'd love to tell you next, if you go to the next slide, Sydney, about the survey that we did. So this is Berson's second high-impact talent acquisition study, and we take very seriously our high-impact studies here at Bersin. The most important piece of information on this very busy slide, though, is the top left. If you're a parent, I know how important all of the ABCs are to your kids, but however, for us, the most important letter is N, which means we had 1,220 respondents from around the world. You look directly below that number. You can see 55% were in the Americas, 32% in EMEA, 13% in APAC. I'm dying to get some time to actually dig into this data and see if there are big differences regionally or not. But I'm just thrilled that it's not just a U.S. survey. We've actually got a global survey here. Then if you look at the top middle employees, sorry, Sydney, we're still on that slide. Just want to say, we had a really good mix of respondents from different size companies. We had a good mix of industries represented in the bottom middle. On the top right, you can see that we've got organizational unit. That's where the participants came from. So 73% were in either an HR or TA, which means, a good 27% were not in HR or TA. And then on the bottom right, you've got the level. And you can see we had over 50% were at the director level or above who took the survey. So we feel really confident about the survey and also then about the results. And on the next slide, you'll see we had 6 findings. And I'm going to breeze through these because we're going to actually spend a little bit of time on each. But the first finding that we found was the importance of alignment of the talent acquisition function with the rest of the business and with the rest of HR. The second finding is actually, I think, new news, which is around the importance of the talent acquisition function when it comes to the enablement of internal mobility. We've always talked about internal candidates as a source of candidates within talent acquisition, but no one's actually stopped to think about the fact that maybe talent acquisition needs to be part of that conversation. So we'll go into that a little bit. Our third finding is around strategic sourcing, which is in the past, people have looked at skills and past experiences on resumes. They may have looked at competencies, but we found that our most mature organizations are also emphasizing a candidate's work ethic, their values, and their potential. So, broadening sort of what's most important. Fourth finding is around the personalization of the talent journey, of the candidate experience and the employment brand, and just how important those are. Our fifth finding was really interesting. For the second time in a row, or the last time we did our high impact study and this time, the capabilities of the talent acquisition team, including hiring managers, are very important. We found 11 differentiators in our study. We had over 100 items in the survey, and 11 were statistically significant when it came to maturity. 2 of that 11 were actually connected with the capabilities of the team. So, you cannot overlook the fact that most of the time when companies are trying to cut back, they get rid of training, but that actually is a big differentiator in terms of the maturity of your talent acquisition function. And then last but definitely not least, the importance of using AI and predictive data to sharpen the TA function. AI is a big buzzword right now. And I'm going to share just a little bit about what we found around AI and predictive data. So those are our 6 findings. Now that I've gone through those, before giving you the sense of what's most important, we're going to go to the next polling question and ask you which is most important to your TA function. So we combined internal mobility and integration with HR and organization. because we could only have 5 choices. Then we have AI predictive data. We have TA team capability development. We have the strategic sourcing one on recruiting for values, work ethic, and potential, or the personalized talent journey. And while our respondents are answering this poll, Glenn, what's most important for you guys at AppDynamics? And you can't say all of them, so you only get to choose one.
So you got me on that. Now it's if you look at all of these areas, these are all definitely important. What we needed to do is take a look at these and prioritize. And one of the key things for us at the stage we're in as a company is recruiting for values, work ethic, and potential. The market out there is highly competitive. For us to focus strictly on knowledge, skills, abilities, and to discount the value of people who exemplify our company values, who have great work ethic and potential, would be wrong. So I would say, in certain order, that would probably be one of the top ones for us.
Okay, terrific. Well, let's see what the audience said. Sydney, if you'd share the results. Well, that actually is the number one, Glenn. I think you're giving some hints to the audience here. Recruiting for values, work ethic, and potential, number one at 43%, followed by TA team capability development. So excited to see that. Usually it comes up last. Internal mobility and integration with HR organization is third, and then there's a lot of white space between those AI and predictive data and then the personalized talent journey. Well, that is super cool because I can, as we're going along here, we're going to share some information, some data on all of these, but also tell you sort of which we found, if you're looking at maturity, which ones you need to be looking at. So with that, let's go to the first finding, which is around alignment of the talent acquisition function. And I'm not going to read the actual finding. You can do that, but this really is where your talent acquisition function is seen as essential in the business strategy, which is why I loved Glenn's business strategy of recruit, retain, and revenue. Like if you do those first two things right, you'll get the revenue. And in some organizations, like I said, nobody cares about TA. It's still called staffing or personnel. It's just it's something that the organization has to do to get people in the door. But in many organizations, that's not the case. Their employees are really what keeps the organization, keep the lights on, and that it is a big concern of the C-suite whether or not they're going to have the right people in the right roles to do the job. And so you can see, we found that 2/3 of our high-performing talent acquisition functions report significant integration with talent management. And I want to just put a plug in here. If you want to look at quality of hire, you really need to have your performance data, your performance management data connected with your TA data. Otherwise, you're just looking at quality of candidate slate or quality of new hire. You're not really looking at quality of hire. The other thing I'd like to just comment on this one is the third bullet on the right-hand side, which says prioritize relationships between recruiters and hiring managers. 4 years ago, when we came out with our first industry study for high-impact talent acquisition, that specific point was the highest differentiator. And the great thing about prioritizing relationships, making sure that those relationships between your recruiters and your hiring managers are strong, the best thing about that is it can be free. Like developing a relationship, developing processes, you don't have to implement something new in order to make that a really high priority. So just want to bring that to your attention as something that's really important. But before we go on to the next slide, Glenn, what for you guys at AppDynamics, what has been most important for you guys in terms of alignment with the rest of talent management and the rest of the organization?
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I think what's enabled us to really position ourselves at the table, so to speak, is the ability to provide our value, so proof of value, right? And we couldn't do that unless we had that executive support. If you look at your budget or any team's budget, one of the highest costs there is payroll. And if you're going to spend that much on payroll, you need to really pay attention to and be very thoughtful around hiring. The most effective way to do that is by partnering with hiring managers. Embed yourself within their organizations, understand what their barriers are and what their challenges are, and then provide solutions. We're here as a business unit, talent acquisition, as a problem-solving team, right? So we need to go beyond just talking about talent acquisition. We need to go deep into their business and understand what the mechanisms are that dictate their decisions, whether it be data or cost. And the more we understand that, and the more we understand their language, and the better aligned we are with their currency, then the more effective we can be as a talent acquisition unit. The second point with alignment with the productivity or performance management is very important as well, because what we needed to understand is how effective our recruiting has been. And the only way we can do that is to tie that into performance data, right? Who are the individuals that are making the impact within the organization? Where did they come from? What are the key profiles and characteristics that are present within each of these individuals? Anytime a candidate asks, you know, what are the key things that make an individual successful in a particular role, we need to be able to answer that with data. So I couldn't agree with you more that those are two very important points.
Terrific. I actually loved what you said about how talent acquisition has to have a seat at the table and be problem solvers. I actually heard a phrase that said, we don't really just want a seat at the table, we want our elbows on the table. And with your elbows on the table, you're really helping to solve problems and be part of that overall business strategy. So thought I'd go ahead and add that. Our next finding was around the new news, the one that I'm probably most excited about, the importance of internal mobility. And like I said, we had a survey that had over 100 items, and one question all by itself was statistically significant, and that is how effective is your talent acquisition function in enabling internal mobility. And we found that those organizations that were high performing at the highest level of maturity were 4 times more likely to deploy a strategic approach to internal mobility. So I looked into this a little bit, and you'd be amazed. Some organizations do nothing in their recruiting department to facilitate internal mobility other than literally processing promotions. Some companies actually will post positions internally for 2 weeks ahead of time before they post them externally. In some organizations, sourcers or recruiters will do Boolean searches on professional networking sites and find employees that work in the organization, but then are told they can't reach out to them proactively because they don't want anybody, the organization is very concerned that there will be any sort of poaching or there's this talent hoarding, rather than looking out for the better organization as a whole, to better the organization as a whole, but also to better the candidates or the employees. A Gallup study recently found that 51% of American workers have a foot out the door, which means, what if you could keep them? Not forever, perhaps, but why can't they build their skills with you? They already like being at your organization. They've been through your performance management process, for better or for worse. That's the topic of another webinar. But you know who they are. They know the company. They appreciate the values and the mission. They might even like their commute. So how important is it to keep people rather than just have people leave and find it, or leave and find it easier to find a new job within the organization after they've left? So I am really passionate about this topic. We actually just published a report here at Deloitte. It's on Deloitte.com called "Are You Overlooking Your Greatest Source of Talent?" And it's an article that's on Deloitte Review and available to anyone who's interested. So a little plug, just do a search for "Are You Overlooking Your Greatest Source of Talent?" and you'll be able to find that article. But tell me, Glenn, about what you guys are doing at AppDynamics in terms of internal mobility.
Yeah, internal mobility is very important for us. To your point, it's better to keep the talent in-house as opposed to talent leaving the company. This notion aligns very well to the first polling question you had. which basically said that it's important that we interview based on values and potential. Ideally, what you'd want is the ability to assess current employees' potential and identify deployable skills into other areas of the business. It's very important to gain buy-in from top down. There's going to be a lot of facilitation required by either the HR or the talent acquisition team, and communication, a high level of communication. It's very careful calibration between two very different teams. Now, the notion that you're robbing Peter to feed Paul, can't be the mentality. It has to be maintaining the level of competency within the organization, and that's really what we're after. One of the key sayings we have here in the company is one company, multiple careers, and I think that will help to continue to maintain the culture of an organization and keep everyone at a place where you don't have to continuously look externally, right? The grass is not always greener.
No, the grass is not always greener. And the thing is that even if people do leave, we're finding the importance of alumni programs, right? Because they may find out that they want to come back, that they really appreciated what they had, but they'll come back with new skills and new experiences. So really do feel important. I do feel like internal mobility is important. And just to put a fine point on the end of it, I think the talent acquisition function needs to partner with the career management function and the learning and development function to really help their employees figure out what their career paths are, and can they grow their skills in an organization, because that's one of the biggest things that employees are looking for. So, and it's a culture, right? It's a culture that says we're not going to hoard talent. I actually was speaking to one Bersin member, and he said that part of their bonus is tied to whether or not they support internal mobility. It's the exact opposite of talent hoarding, right? Are they trying to find new roles and new responsibilities for their employees to keep the valued employees with the organization? So thank you, Glenn, for that. Sydney, I'll have you go to the next finding, which, as Glenn said, is very well connected to this one around strategic sourcing, about how important it is to look at candidates' work ethic, values, and potential, right? Of course, that's connected to internal mobility, because you want to hire for potential and see if, people, in fact, will be able to do other roles down the line. Organizations change, the focus change, the technology changes. And for too long, many companies said, oh, we're going to put in a new technology. Let's just get rid of all the people who did the old technology and bring in new people. Well, that's not always an option. Other research that I've done has shown that as unemployment goes down in this country, voluntary turnover goes up. It's almost a one-to-one negative correlation. But unemployment now is almost the lowest it's ever been, I think, here in the U.S., and voluntary turnover is subsequently very high. And so organizations need to start thinking about, well, we may not have a need for you in this role anymore, but we know that you have potential, and we're going to help you learn the skills that you need in order to be successful in another role. So you can see that here's some data that 64% of the mature organizations seek non-traditional talent sources. 89% use workplace values as a basis for hiring. The best number on here, though, is that 92% encourages hiring for long-term potential. And they're also 4 times more likely to build talent capabilities to meet future needs. So somebody's thinking strategically. Somebody's saying, you know what, you're a good fit now, but you'll be an even better fit in the future. So Glenn, do you want to talk a little bit more about what you guys are doing at AppDynamics around strategic sourcing? You gave us a little preview earlier, but tell us what you're doing.
Yeah, most definitely. So I think if I look at AppDynamics and our demographics, a little more than 40% consist of the millennials. When you look at what is important to millennials, these things align perfectly: work ethic, values, and potential. Interesting, I was at a conference last evening, and there's a discussion around college degrees. there's less alignment between college degrees and actual career path and career choice. And if you remove that, what do you have left? Values, you have work ethic, your potential. So, those are key things for us to be able to identify and quantify as best we can during interview stages. And then have real discussions, genuine discussions with candidates. And that will enable you to maintain agility as the market changes, as your company changes. There will be numerous organizational changes that will require different skill sets. Anyone who begins with a strong fundamental, such as the values, work ethic, and potential, can easily make those changes as well and then rebuild their skill sets.
Okay, terrific. Well, we're going to keep moving here. We've got 3 more findings to go, so let's go on to the next one. The next one's around the personalization of the talent journey and looking at employee experience, looking at candidate experience, and employment brand. And I always like to talk about employment brand from the perspective of it's one thing to tell candidates what your organization's employment brand is, but it's another thing to live it, so that when you've got new hires come on board, they find congruence between what's been promised and what they actually find. And so employment brand is definitely, it's something that's shared between talent acquisition and talent management. But it's a huge enabler of retention, and the new hire turnover numbers actually really do show. And so you can see here some statistics around the importance of marketing roles to candidates, providing timely and transparent feedback, communicating with all candidates. Look at that number, 76% of the high TA performing functions communicate with all candidates, selected and not selected. And in fact, if you want to be part of the Talent Board's Candidate Experience Awards, you actually have to send a survey to non-selected candidates as well. You can see then the importance of iterating the candidate experience and cultivating. One of the things I did when I looked at the 11 differentiators for talent acquisition was to look at what came up first, like what was the most significant. And I was actually surprised to see that employment brand was first. Now, it's not that much stronger than the next one, which is predictive data, which I will talk about in a few minutes. But just wanted to let you guys know, employment brand didn't come up very high on our poll, but yet it's the strongest differentiator for talent acquisition maturity. So perhaps it's time to take a look at employment brand again and really make sure you've got a strategy, make sure that what you're doing, what you're telling candidates is actually being lived out among your employees. So Glenn, anything you'd like to add on that topic?
Yeah, employment brand is very important. We are paying a lot of attention to our brand. It is, and we define this as something that candidates basically identify AppDynamics with, right? When they talk about AppDynamics or hear about AppDynamics, what is it they say? We are putting a lot of emphasis and attention toward feedback from our employees, current employees, as well as candidates. There's a application out there that we are managing very closely to gather real-time feedback from folks who've interviewed here and current employees, and really utilizing that to the extent that it's our primary feedback loop. And it's going to be something that we're going to continue to pay attention to. Our executive team is very cognizant about the feedback received from this platform. And again, it's one of the key things that aligns very well to those 3 R's I talked about earlier. Recruiting is always number 1. Okay,
terrific. All right, so then let's go on to finding number 5. And this is the one around the talent acquisition capabilities, the one that I was shocked to see come up number 2 in our poll. And we talked a lot about the wording for this, but we came up with the fact that high-performing recruiting teams, so that would include the TA team as well as hiring managers, continuously regenerate because of dedication to upskilling informal learning, and professional growth opportunities. So it's not just the online learning, although there is, something to be said for the fact that if you're going to be interviewing people as a hiring manager, you probably need to go through some sort of learning, or at the very least, you need a toolkit that says what you can and cannot do. You can see there the data says that the high-performing TA functions are 4 times more likely to develop and coach their people. But you can't stop there. You've got to actually be looking at, so what are you doing for your recruiters in terms of their exposure to innovative TA or their networking with peers and industry thought leaders? How much do they know about the business units that they're supporting? Perhaps they need to go to a business unit type conference to really bring themselves up to speed and be a strategic partner with the business unit. So, Glenn, tell us what you guys are doing in terms of TA capabilities.
Yeah, very important. This ties into retention as well. Recruiters have their ear to the ground. Recruiters have companies reaching out to them constantly. So, we can't be oblivious to that. The key to ensuring that recruiters maintain their high impact capabilities is training. You mentioned 1 or 2 things that are very important, and something I alluded to earlier, which is embed yourself within the organization. We need to go beyond just being recruiters. We need to become talent partners to the extent that we understand how the business functions, and then tie those into our activities as recruiters, and then formulate the solutions. We want to continuously emphasize that half of the recruiting equation, if you will. So you have the science, where you will utilize data and be data driven to make your decisions. Then you have the art. The art of it is really understanding what the market is and what candidates are thinking, what managers are thinking. We not only want to continuously train our recruiters and provide them with as many tools as possible, but also train managers. And I think that's what you said a little earlier. Managers are an extension of the recruiting arm, if not the primary piece of that recruiting. And I would even extend that further to saying that everyone in the company is a recruiter, right? So at some point, to some degree, there needs to be training for everyone within the company. How do you pitch the company? How do you talk about opportunities within the organization? You need to find your champions within the company, and then have your recruiters be able to leverage all of that those tactical efforts, in addition to all of your digital efforts through social media, marketing, and employment branding.
I completely agree. And I'm only rushing on to the next one in terms of the time, but would love to talk to you more about that at some time. In terms of this one, defining 6, this is where we're looking at AI and predictive data. And when I talk to talent acquisition leaders, they tell me that their biggest challenge is around AI, because there's too many vendors, there's too many ways to use it, everything is glitzy and it's new, it's a buzzword. So we really just wanted to sort of say, so why is this important? Well, you can see that the high-performing TA functions are 4 times more likely to embed advanced TA technologies, such as cognitive tools and AI. It's still a small percentage that are doing it. We have companies at level 4 that are just starting down the AI path. But they're 2 times more likely to innovate, to test new processes, tools, capabilities, and trainings, to get at the point that Glenn was just making. Did want to just call out the importance of predictive data. Remember I said that employment brand was the #1 differentiator in terms of the strength of it, in terms of TA maturity. Well, predictive data is #2. And yet when I talk to organizations, I'm not finding very many examples of what organizations are doing with predictive data. So one of the things you can do is you can analyze your headcount, use predictive data for that. You can also use it to develop your TA strategy. You can also use it to assess why people are leaving your organization, and to think about sourcing. It's sometimes confused with AI, but there's some new sourcing techniques that are based on predictive data algorithms that will actually find candidates faster. So think about how you're using predictive data. I'm actually working on a report at the moment. If you have any interesting examples, I'd love to hear from you of sort of how you're using predictive data. Would love to sort of hear from you and possibly include it in our report. But Glenn, what are you guys doing when it comes to AI and predictive data?
Yeah, I like what you said earlier regarding predictive data and how you use it. We need to understand where our talent is coming from and at what levels. We also want to understand where our talent is going. So, we want to be able to track our talent after they leave AppDynamics and be able to understand, why. And certainly headcount is going to be important for us in order to determine our capacity planning as a recruiting function, right? We want to resource properly and be able to deliver based on who we have on board, and then balance that out with all of our automation and AI tools, which we'll talk about more toward the end of this session.
Okay, terrific. Well, why don't we go on to our very next topic, which is to show you guys our the Bersin 2018 talent acquisition maturity model. You can see it has 4 levels, with the bottom level being the most reactive, least mature, and the top level being the most proactive and most optimized. Just real quickly, a little bit of information around basic and transactional. You can see that this really is where we think about, are the organizations, are they just getting people in the door? Talent acquisition is standalone. The systems are not standardized across the organization. It's very reactive when it comes to internal mobility. There's only compliance training being offered to recruiters and hiring managers. This is where you're using Excel spreadsheets to track your TA metrics, and whenever you do that, it's only the historical metrics, obviously, that you're tracking. But 24% of the people in our survey, the respondents, were at this level, and so would encourage anybody who's at a level 1 or primarily at a level 1. You could have some components of your function, your TA function, in one level and some at another, but would really be encouraging you if you're still got generalists, HR generalists doing your recruiting for you, start to think about what would it take to get you to that next level of talent acquisition performance. And the next level is called standardized and focused. You can see we had 50% of our respondents here, and we were like, oh wow, that's a lot of people. And how do you make the case that they really need to be moving on from there? So, at this point, talent acquisition is standardized across the organization. A little bit more time and attention is being taken. There's some work being done on employment brand and candidate experience. You're starting to look at hiring targets. Recruiters are building relationships with hiring managers. They're trying to think about diversity and the importance of it. You're starting to think about how can you use data, but you're not really there yet. You're just starting to think about it. And so that's the level 2, standardized and focused. And the biggest jump is between level 2 and level 3. It's going to take a few years. It's going to take some investment and real commitment to get to the next level, which is level 3, which is integrated and evidence-based. And this is where talent acquisition is integrated across most of HR and talent management. Recruiters are partnering really effectively with hiring managers. Internal mobility has become a strategic opportunity, a way to make a differentiator in the organization. The candidate experience and the employment brand, they're prioritized. They're updated on a regular basis. They're measured. You're starting to think about how advanced analytics can impact your strategy for TA and your workforce planning. And you're starting to experiment with AI and machine learning. At level 4, which is really our optimized level, 13% were at level 4. It's called personalized and digital enhanced. And this is really where, talent acquisition is reinforcing the organizational culture and is fully integrated. Talent acquisition is seen as an important strategic partner to get the business strategy accomplished. The recruiters are trusted business advisors, not just they're not just partnering at that point, but like Glenn had said, they've got their ear to the ground and they really know what's going on in that particular area. Internal mobility is embedded, right? You're trying to make sure that, your organization keeps as many candidates as it can, as many employees as it can. Not all, you never want to have 100% retention, but you are trying to make it employee-centric. This is also where you've got, individualized and personalized content in your candidate experience, in as much as you can, right? You're communicating in a personalized way. People aren't getting just messages that, feel like they came from a machine, or they're not feeling like their communications are going into a black hole. You're starting here to look at potential and fit, right, with values and capabilities and work ethic. And it's, really important to you that you're not just hiring based on skills. This is where your predictive data, AI, and machine learning, you're optimizing that TA function by looking at predictive data and using AI and machine learning. And really, this is where your TA and hiring manager capabilities are built through exposure and shared experiences as part of the organization. So it's a very optimal level. Not that many people are at that level, 13%, but it's definitely something to shoot for, and to basically be able to say, look, we know what the advantages are of being at that highest level. So what would it take for us to get to that highest level? So Glenn, when you look at this maturity model, what do you think about AppDynamics? Where would you put yourself? Between a couple levels, or flat, straight in one, or what do you think?
Yeah, no, this is wonderful, and thank you for those descriptions. So, maybe I'll start at level 1 and sort of draw a correlation to where AppDynamics was when I first started here about 4.5 years ago. I would hope that most companies who are at level 1 are, pretty much in the startup stage. If it's a mature company still at level 1, then that might provide you some indication as to the level of priority recruiting is. So something to think about. When I first started at AppDynamics, there were less than 300 people here. We were definitely running standalone. We had, a sort of a shell of a HR team. Our group was primarily talent acquisition, and there were a lot of things we did crossing over into the HR side. Of course, not as sophisticated as things are being done in HR today. But certainly doing what was necessary at that stage as a company. I would liken our sort of evolution at that time, using a football analogy, being in the leather helmet stage. Then over the next year or two, we crossed over into level 2, where we began really partnering with hiring managers. It was no longer, hey, let's just get the people in because we have funding. Let's build the company out to show growth. We were really putting a lot more thought into how we were hiring, where we were hiring, looking at lower cost areas to target folks. And so we began to expand a lot into international areas as well. That in and of itself is another experience when you're recruiting, but certainly something we needed to do to maintain our competitive advantage and continue the year-over-year headcount growth that we've experienced. And then I would say we're in the midst of level 3 at this time, where we are integrated across most of our business units across the company. We have full teams that support these different lines of business, and each team runs the talent acquisition as if it were their own company, right? So there's a certain level of autonomy and responsibility that will come along with that, but it does provide all of the recruiting leaders and individual contributors on the team a lot of ability to make decisions and to help drive the business toward growth. We have some elements of level 4, but I wouldn't say that we're at the point where we're done with it and we're happy with it. So level 4 is purely aspirational for us at this moment.
Okay, terrific. Well, I know we're going to be running out of time here, and we did want to leave some time at the end for questions. So we have a poll for you all, but also just start to think if you have any questions, please submit them through the question feature online. The next poll is, well, you've now found out what some of the advantages of talent acquisition maturity is. Which workforce outcome would be most compelling to your organizational leadership? Would it be to retain top talent, to address people topics in a timely manner, to engage in database decision-making, or to develop capable managers, or to supply top talent to meet current needs? And Glenn, just again, which one of these, you can only pick one, do you think would be most compelling to your organization if you went back and said, hey guys, good news, the closer we can get to talent, higher levels of talent acquisition maturity, the higher our workforce outcome will be. Which one would you pick?
Retaining top talent, most definitely. We spend a lot of time finding and identifying talent, and it's something we need to really pay a lot of attention to retain. As I mentioned, there's a lot of effort going into internal mobility. One company, multiple careers. And certainly something that'll enable us to maintain our competency levels within the organization.
Okay, well, let's see what the results are, and then we'll just quickly show you some workforce outcomes of TA maturity. 53% to supply top talent to meet current needs. That is the mission of the TA function. So I think not surprised to see that one coming up first. Number 2, retain top talent and develop capable managers, very close. Then engage in database decision making. Okay, that's awesome. Well, if you go to the next slide, Sydney, we'll just show you real quickly what some of the workforce outcomes are of, first of all, 6 times more likely to engage in database decision making. The ones that came up 3.2 times more likely to supply top talent needs and 3 times more likely to retain top talent. So again, here's some of the business case points that we wanted to provide you when you're asking for more investment in talent acquisition. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Glenn, to go through a little bit of a case study from AppDynamics, and then we'll answer some questions in whatever time we have left.
All right. Well, great. Thank you very much. So what I want to do is go over a little background on AppDynamics, beginning with the first slide. AppDynamics started business back in 2008. There was an acquisition by Cisco about a year and a half ago, and over the past, or rather over the first 12 months of the acquisition, we were spending it trying figuring out where our integration points were. We're past that now, and certainly it has had an impact on the way we do things and our culture as a company. The number of employees now is actually just shy of 2,000. We're at 1,998. So we expect to hit our 2,000 person milestone here by next week. As you can see there, our average year-over-year growth has been 36% toward headcount. So it's been a tremendous effort by not only our recruiting team, but the company as a whole. A lot of our hiring comes not only from recruiting efforts, but of course, efforts of everyone within the company to provide referrals. And as I mentioned earlier, internal mobility are very key to that growth. Recruiting team worldwide is 40 plus. It continues to grow. Our business is international, so we need to continuously look at opportunities wherever that might be. We hire in many different areas, primarily sales and software engineering. And then, of course, based on hires in the sales and engineering areas, then you have all of the peripheral roles to support new logos, build product, and to ensure that we have a strong go-to-market strategy. Can we go to the next slide, please? So challenges. I mentioned earlier that we went through an acquisition about a year and a half ago, so that certainly impacted our ability to brand the company. all the things that come along with an acquisition. Retention is one of them. That's why during your last polling questions, I put that as number one for AppDynamics. Anytime you are with a high growth software startup company, as we were, and then you're acquired by a large technology company like Cisco, there is going to be a lot of turnover in terms of folks who are sort of that startup DNA, that mentality, and trying to shift into a more of a structured environment. So, we had to be very thoughtful and careful about how to manage that. And again, anything else that comes with attrition, because there's uncertainty, of course, that, what's going to happen to me, what will happen to my job, what will my job look like. So we had to sit down and identify profiles, and what do they look like today, what did they look like yesterday, and what will it look like tomorrow. We needed to sit down and identify what that was. There are going to be some changes within our compensation structure, because we've acquired Cisco's grading levels and compensation structure. And then with that, we need to continuously address the war for talent. It's a mantra that has existed for the last 20 years, and it continues to exist. And I think it's the best one. I don't know how else to say it. And then another key initiative for us in Challenge is diversity and inclusion. We are putting a lot of effort toward ensuring that we continue to and we develop more consciousness around diversity hiring. So there's a lot of effort being put toward that as well. Next slide, please. So Intello, how did we get introduced to Intello? We were fortunate enough to be in the same building as Intello during Intello's early years. At that time, we had been exploring a number of different AI tools and continuously inviting vendors in to talk about what their platforms were and how it worked. And it was really a continuous process of evaluation for our team. It was not a effort on my part alone. It was the entire team. And in order for us to really ensure that we adopted the right tools and buy-in so that everyone will leverage the tools, I needed to get everyone involved. So it was really a team effort. And we needed to make sure that any AI tool that was out there had to provide us uplift with respect to the different technology stacks that we recruit in. Now, this changes as well. What you see here under our technology stack has evolved. Some of the things remain consistent, of course. More than 75% of our engineering roles is Java-based, but in terms of evolving technologies, a number of these things are different and are new based on compared to what it was 3 or 4 years ago. We also want to make sure that we leverage any AI tools that have diversity sort of features in mind, the ability to reach out to diverse candidate pools, the ability to have contact information available, and of course, outreach campaigns, whether they be email or text. Next slide. All right, so we've had some tremendous results leveraging Intello, and as you can see here, I won't go through every data point here, but Intello has certainly provided us some uplift in those areas that I mentioned a moment ago, and we continue to evaluate all of our AI tools. Utilization metrics is very important for us, and we want to make sure that we're investing in the right areas. Next slide. All right, so we will continue to evaluate different AI tools and automation. It's something that will enable us to get ahead of our competition. We are looking to a number of different things now, and really the trick is to know what the goal is, and then find the right mix of tools that will enable you to reach that objective. So a good blend of automation and AI is going to be the key. I think Jack Ma said it best when he said that automation and AI should not replace people, but it should provide them, enhance their ability to get their job done. And that's what we're after.
I completely agree, Glenn. And since we're a little bit limited with time, I don't think we'll go over those key takeaways. But Sydney, why don't you let us know? We'll do a few questions and we'll end at the top of the hour. But what questions have come in?
First off, I'd love to thank both Robin and Glenn for joining us. This was great to hear, how high-performing talent acquisition teams are working and how, they prioritize different parts of their job. So thank you both for sharing your insights today. The first question I have is for Robin. Robin, earlier in the webinar, you mentioned, it can be difficult to change the perspective that internal mobility is a good thing. Glenn kind of talks to this and saying, you don't want to steal from Peter to feed Paul, and that's kind of the wrong way to look at this. How have you seen companies that come at internal mobility with that perspective turn things around and change the internal culture to encourage internal mobility?
So they've done two things, and one is to change their culture, right? What you were talking about, that idea of hoarding talent, the culture of hoarding talent or not wanting to share. You've got to change your culture. So it's got to be driven from the top, from leadership. Leadership has to say, look, if people are leaving your department to build new skills and go and do new things in another place, and it takes you a little bit of time to get the next person up to speed, that is okay, because it means we didn't lose a person. They didn't walk out the door. The second thing is to create a talent marketplace. And, not just list the open career opportunities, but connect it with your learning and make it possible that if someone is really motivated to get a new job, that if they apply for a job, there's some discussion with them about, look, you don't have the skills today, but here's what it would take to get you those skills. So that's why there has to be this combination between talent acquisition, who knows if somebody's applied, with the learning department, who can say, okay, so these are possible learnings or exposure or gig assignments. This is what you could do to get there. And then like that career management piece, which says, we're going to make this easy for you to see. Sometimes people have said, I can't even navigate how to find a new position in this organization. And, they think their only option is to wait for their boss to die, which that's, at the end of the day, not a great attitude. So make the career path easy, make it easily navigable. It shouldn't be a maze.
Yes, thanks for sharing that. And I could not agree more. Making those opportunities available and sharing them internally is a great way to turn that culture around and show that, upper management and the executives value internal mobility. We are at the top of the hour, so we are going to have to cut questions short. Thank you both again for joining us, and thank you all attendees for joining us as well and tuning into the webinar. I will be sharing the recording and the slides in the coming days, so please look out for that. And thank you again all for joining us. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Thank you both.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.